Vega's venom glands throbbed painfully as she pinned Patrick Simpson against the cold metal wall of the storage room. The human male's offer to milk her glands echoed in her mind, a shocking proposition that challenged everything she thought she knew about his kind. The dimly lit space aboard the interspecies diplomatic vessel, Harmony, felt suffocating. Vega's scales bristled with a mix of anger and desperation. She had cornered Patrick after he stumbled upon her most closely guarded secret. Una's females required regular milking of their venom glands to maintain hormonal balance and prevent agonizing swelling. Patrick's chest heaved beneath Vega's grip. His eyes, wide with a mixture of fear and determination, darted between her face and the swollen glands on her upper arms. As a trained xenobiologist, he recognized the signs of her distress. "I can help you," Patrick said, his voice steady despite the precarious situation. "I know how to safely extract the venom. Please, let me assist you." Vega's grip loosened slightly, her mind reeling. Every instinct screamed at her to reject his offer. Human males were selfish, untrustworthy creatures, or so she had always believed. Yet here was Patrick, offering aid at great personal risk. His compassion contradicted everything she thought she knew about humans. The storage room's shelves, stocked with supplies for both human and Una's crew members, seemed to close in around them. This cramped space, like the Harmony itself, symbolized the forced coexistence of their species. Outside these walls, tensions between humans and Unas escalated daily. Earth's aggressive expansion threatened Una's territory, pushing both civilizations to the brink of interstellar war. Patrick's presence on the Harmony was part of a last-ditch effort to negotiate peace. Vega, assigned as a reluctant liaison, now found herself at a crossroads. Her body screamed for relief, while her mind grappled with years of ingrained prejudice. "Why?" Vega hissed, her forked tongue flicking out in agitation. "Why would you risk exposure to my venom?" Patrick's gaze remained steady. "Because it's the right thing to do. We're all stuck on this ship together. If we can't help each other, what hope do our species have?" His words struck a chord within Vega. She released her hold on him, taking a step back. Patrick moved slowly, telegraphing his movements as he reached for her swollen glands. "I'll be gentle," he assured her. "Just tell me if you need me to stop." Vega's muscles tensed as Patrick's fingers made contact with her scales. This intimate act, born of necessity, held the potential to bridge the vast gulf between their species. As he began the delicate milking process, Vega realized that this moment, this unexpected act of kindness, could have far-reaching consequences for both of them in the future of human-Unas relations. The fate of two civilizations hung in the balance as Patrick carefully extracted the first drops of venom. Vega exhaled, feeling the pressure in her glands subside. In this unlikely encounter, amidst rising galactic tensions, a fragile trust began to form, one that might just save them all. As Patrick's fingers made contact with Vega's scales, a shiver ran through her body. The storage room seemed to shrink around them, the air thick with tension. Vega's muscles coiled, ready to strike at the slightest provocation. Yet, as Patrick began to work, his touch was surprisingly gentle. "I'm going to start with the left gland," Patrick murmured, his voice low and steady. "You might feel a slight pressure. Just try to relax." Vega's breath hitched as Patrick's fingers probed the swollen gland. A moment of discomfort gave way to a sudden release of pressure. She exhaled sharply, her body instinctively leaning into his touch. "That's it," Patrick encouraged. "You're doing great. I'm going to move to the right gland now." As Patrick continued the milking process, Vega found herself studying his face, his brow furrowed in concentration, eyes focused intently on his task. There was no disgust in his expression, no hint of revulsion at touching an alien species, only a calm commitment to help. Minutes passed in silence, broken only by Vega's occasional hiss of discomfort. The pain in her glands began to subside, replaced by an unfamiliar warmth spreading through her body. Vega's mind reeled, grappling with the conflicting emotions surging within her. Suddenly, the storage room door slid open with a harsh metallic screech. Captain Thorne burst in, his face a mask of alarm. "Step away from her, Simpson," Thorne barked, his hand hovering near his sidearm. Patrick jerked back, startled by the intrusion. His fingers slipped from Vega's partially drained gland, causing a sharp spasm of pain. Vega hissed reflexively, raising her arm in a defensive posture. Captain Thorne's eyes widened, misinterpreting Vega's movement as an attack. He lunged forward, intent on separating the two. "Captain, wait!" Patrick called out, but it was too late. In a blur of motion, Vega's arm swung out. A spray of venom erupted from her partially milked gland, catching Captain Thorne across the forearm. The effect was instantaneous. Thorne's eyes rolled back in his head as he crumpled to the floor, his body racked with violent convulsions. "No!" Vega cried out, horrified by what she'd done. Patrick dropped to his knees beside the fallen captain, quickly assessing the situation. "We need to act fast," he said, his voice taut with urgency. "Vega, I need you to finish milking your glands. We'll use your venom to create an antidote." Vega stood frozen, her eyes fixed on Thorne's writhing form. Patrick's words seemed to come from far away, muffled by the rush of blood in her ears. "Vega!" Patrick's sharp tones snapped her back to reality. "There's no time. If we don't treat him quickly, he could die. Do you understand?" Nodding numbly, Vega raised her trembling hands to her glands. She worked quickly, wincing as she extracted the remaining venom. Patrick scrambled to the medical kit mounted on the wall, rifling through its contents. "Bring the venom here," Patrick instructed, laying out various vials and instruments on a nearby shelf. "I'll need to synthesize the antidote using components from both our species." Vega hurried over, carefully transferring the milked venom into a sterile container Patrick held out. Their fingers brushed, and for a moment, their eyes met. In that brief exchange, a silent understanding passed between them. Whatever their differences, whatever conflicts existed between their species, none of it mattered now. They were united in their desperate race to save a life. Patrick worked with swift precision, mixing Vega's venom with various compounds from the medical kit. His hands moved in a blur, measuring, combining, and shaking vials with practiced ease. Vega watched in fascination, marveling at the depth of his knowledge. "Hand me that syringe," Patrick said, gesturing to a sealed package. Vega complied, tearing open the sterile wrapping and passing it to him. As Patrick filled the syringe with the newly created antidote, Captain Thorne's convulsions intensified. Foam flecked his lips, his eyes rolling wildly in their sockets. "Hold him still," Patrick ordered, kneeling beside the captain. Vega grasped Thorne's shoulders, using her superior strength to pin him to the floor. Patrick swabbed a patch of skin on Thorne's arm, then plunged the needle home. For several heart-stopping seconds, nothing happened. Then gradually, Thorne's convulsions began to subside. His breathing, which had been rapid and shallow, slowly steadied. Patrick pressed his fingers to Thorne's neck, counting silently. "His pulse is stabilizing," Patrick announced, his shoulders sagging with relief. "I think we got to him in time." Vega released her hold on the captain, backing away as the full weight of what had transpired crashed over her. She had attacked the captain of the Harmony, jeopardizing everything the mission stood for. And yet, against all challenges, a human, Patrick, had saved him. As if reading her thoughts, Patrick turned to face her. "This doesn't have to be the end," he said softly. "What happened here? It could be a beginning." Before Vega could respond, the storage room door slid open once more. Medical personnel rushed in, alerted by the ship's systems to the captain's distress. As they swarmed around Thorne's prone form, Patrick and Vega found themselves pushed to the periphery of the unfolding drama. Standing side by side, Human and Unas watched as Captain Thorne was carefully lifted onto a stretcher. The medical team peppered them with questions about what had transpired, but Vega found herself unable to speak. It was Patrick who stepped forward, calmly explaining the situation and the treatment they had administered. As the medical team prepared to transport Thorne to the infirmary, Vega felt a light touch on her arm. She turned to find Patrick looking at her, his expression a mix of concern and something else, something she couldn't quite identify. "We should go with them," he said quietly. "There will be questions, but whatever happens next, we'll face it together." Vega nodded, still processing the whirlwind of events. As they followed the medical team out of the storage room, she realized that everything had changed. The boundaries between Human and Unas, The prejudices and fears that had seemed so insurmountable just hours ago now felt less absolute. In the sterile corridor of the Harmony, surrounded by the controlled chaos of the medical emergency, Vega and Patrick walked side by side. Their shared ordeal had forged an unexpected connection, a fragile bridge between their species. As they approached the infirmary, both understood that the true test of this newfound alliance was only just beginning. The infirmary doors hissed open as Vega and Patrick entered, trailing behind the medical team wheeling Captain Thorne on a stretcher. The sterile white room buzzed with activity as nurses and doctors swarmed around the unconscious captain. Dr. Elena Reeves, the ship's chief medical officer, strode towards them, her piercing blue eyes taking in the scene. "What happened?" she demanded, her gaze darting between Patrick and Vega. Patrick stepped forward, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Una's venom poisoning, doctor. We've administered an initial antidote, but he'll need further treatment." Dr. Reeves nodded sharply, her mind already racing through treatment protocols. "Show me what you've done," she ordered, leading Patrick to a nearby workstation. As Patrick explained the antidote synthesis to Dr. Reeves, Vega stood frozen, her scales prickling with anxiety. The infirmary's harsh lighting made her feel exposed, vulnerable. She watched as human medical staff cast wary glances in her direction, their movements becoming more guarded. Suddenly, the ship-wide intercom crackled to life. Commander Jack Harper's voice filled the room, tight with barely held-back anger. "Attention, all crew members. There has been an incident involving Captain Thorne. All personnel are to remain at their stations. Security teams, report to your designated areas immediately." The atmosphere in the infirmary shifted instantly. The human staff's expressions hardened, their eyes now fixed on Vega with open hostility. She could sense their fear, their anger, emotions that threatened to ignite the already volatile situation. Patrick, noticing the change, moved to stand beside Vega. "We need to explain what happened," he said quietly, "before this gets out of hand." Vega nodded, her throat dry. She knew what she had to do, even as every instinct screamed at her to retreat, to hide. With trembling fingers, she reached for the nearest communication panel. "This is Vega, Una's delegate." She spoke into the intercom, her voice echoing throughout the ship. "What happened to Captain Thorne was an accident. I take full responsibility for my actions, but please understand, it was not an attack." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "A human, Patrick Simpson, has been working to save the captain's life. He created an antidote using my venom. We are not enemies here. We are trying to help." As Vega's words faded, an uneasy silence settled over the infirmary. Dr. Reeves, who had paused in her work to listen, gave Vega an appraising look before turning back to Patrick. "Let's finish this antidote," she said briskly. "Every second counts." Patrick nodded, falling into step beside the doctor as they hurried to complete the treatment. Vega watched them work, marveling at the seamless cooperation between the two humans despite the circumstances. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as Patrick and Dr. Reeves raced against time. Finally, Dr. Reeves straightened, holding a syringe filled with a pale green liquid. "This is it," she announced, moving swiftly to Captain Thorne's bedside. With practiced ease, Dr. Reeves administered the antidote. The room held its collective breath, all eyes fixed on the monitors displaying Thorne's vital signs. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing changed. Then slowly, the erratic lines on the screen began to stabilize. Dr. Reeves exhaled sharply, a small smile tugging at her lips. "He's responding. Good work, Mr. Simpson." The tension in the room eased slightly, but Vega knew this crisis was far from finished. As if on cue, the infirmary doors slid open, revealing Commander Jack Harper, flanked by two security officers. "Dr. Reeves, report," Harper barked, his eyes narrowing as they landed on Vega. As Dr. Reeves quickly summarized the situation, Vega felt Patrick's presence at her side. His silent support steadied her, even as she braced herself for what was to come. Commander Harper listened to Dr. Reeves's explanation, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he turned to face Patrick and Vega. "While I appreciate your efforts to save the captain, this incident cannot go uninvestigated. Mr. Simpson, Delegate Vega, you are both confined to your quarters until further notice." Patrick opened his mouth to protest, but Harper held up a hand, silencing him. This is not up for discussion. Security will escort you now. As the security officers moved to flank them, Vega caught Patrick's eye. In that brief moment, she saw her own drive reflected back at her. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. The walk to their quarters was tense, the corridors eerily empty, save for the occasional security patrol. As they reached the junction where they would be separated, Patrick turned to Vega. "We'll find a way through this," he said quietly, his voice firm with conviction. Vega nodded, her throat tight with emotion she couldn't quite name. As she was led away to her own quarters, she could feel the weight of the ship's eyes upon her. The fragile piece they had worked so hard to build now balanced on a knife's edge. In the privacy of her quarters, Vega sank onto her bed, her mind turning. She knew that somewhere on the ship, Ambassador Zara would be demanding answers, while human diplomats likely called for retribution. The delicate dance of interspecies politics had just become infinitely more complex. As the ship's systems hummed around her, Vega closed her eyes, focusing on the memory of Patrick's steady presence. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew one thing with certainty. Their unexpected alliance had become the key to preventing an interspecies war. Now they just had to find a way to use it, to prevent an interspecies war. The hours of confinement dragged on, each minute feeling like an eternity. Vega paced her quarters, her claws clicking against the metal floor. The tension on the ship was palpable, even through the closed doors. Suddenly, her communication panel lit up. "Delegate Vega, please report to the medical bay." Dr. Reeves's voice crackled through the speaker. Puzzled but relieved to be free from her quarters, Vega made her way to the infirmary. As she entered, she saw Patrick already there, deep in conversation with Dr. Reeves. They both looked up as she approached. "Ah, Vega?" Dr. Reeves said, her tone businesslike but not unfriendly. "We've been reviewing the data from Captain Thorne's treatment, and we've made some intriguing discoveries. I've convinced Commander Harper to allow us to form a task force to investigate further." Patrick nodded, his eyes meeting Vega's. "Your venom, when combined with human biochemistry, has properties we've never seen before. It could revolutionize our medical capabilities." Vega's scales rippled with surprise. "You want to study my venom further?" "Not just study it," Dr. Reeves replied. "We want to work together, humans and Unas, to explore its potential. This could be the key to bridging the gap between our species." Over the next few days, the medical bay became a hive of activity. Vega found herself working closely with Patrick and Dr. Reeves, analyzing the molecular structure of her venom and its interactions with human physiology. As they worked, Vega couldn't help but notice the change in the atmosphere. The fear and hostility she had sensed before were gradually being replaced by curiosity and cautious optimism. She caught glimpses of human crew members peering into the lab, their expressions more intrigued than wary. One afternoon, as Vega was carefully extracting another sample of her venom, she felt Patrick's presence beside her. He handed her a sterile container, their fingers brushing. The contact sent a shiver through her, one that had nothing to do with fear. "You're getting pretty good at that," Patrick said, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Vega felt her scales flush with warmth. "I've had a good teacher," she replied, surprised by the softness in her own voice. Their eyes met, and for a moment the rest of the world seemed to fade away. The cultural and biological barriers between them suddenly felt less insurmountable. The moment was broken by the sound of the infirmary doors sliding open. Captain Thorne strode in, looking pale but determined. "Captain!" Dr. Reeves exclaimed, moving to intercept him. "You should be resting." Thorne waved her off. "I've rested enough. I want to see what you've been working on." As Dr. Reeves began explaining their findings, Vega noticed the change in Thorne's demeanor. The suspicion and hostility she had seen before were gone, replaced by genuine interest and something that looked almost like gratitude when he glanced her way. "This is remarkable work," Thorne said when Dr. Reeves finished her explanation. "I want you to continue this research. In fact, I'm going to recommend to command that we expand this task force." Patrick and Vega exchanged surprised looks. This was more than they had dared hope for. As Thorne turned to leave, he paused, looking directly at Vega. "And Delegate Vega, I owe you my thanks. Your quick actions and your willingness to help, despite the risk to yourself, likely saved my life. I won't forget that. Vega inclined her head, too overwhelmed to speak. As Thorne left, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Maybe, just maybe, there was hope for true cooperation between their species. The following weeks saw a flurry of activity as the task force's work gained momentum. Vega and Patrick found themselves spending more and more time together, their initial wariness giving way to a deep mutual respect, and something more, something neither of them quite dared to name. One evening, as they were reviewing data late into the ship's night cycle, an alarm blared through the ship. Red emergency lights bathed the room in an eerie glow. "Attention, all crew," Commander Harper's voice rang out over the intercom. "We've received a distress signal from a nearby Unas colony. They're under attack by an unknown alien force. All hands to battle stations." Vega felt her blood run cold. An attack on an Unas colony? She looked at Patrick, seeing her own shock and concern mirrored in his eyes. "We have to help," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Patrick nodded, already moving towards the door. "Come on, we need to find Captain Thorne. If anyone can convince Command to respond, it's him." As they raced through the corridors of the Harmony, Vega realized that this crisis could either tear apart the fragile peace they had built or cement it forever. The true test of human-Unas cooperation was about to begin. The true test of human-Unas cooperation was about to unfold in ways neither Vega nor Patrick could have anticipated. As they raced through the corridors, alarms blaring around them, they encountered Captain Thorne emerging from the command center. His face was grim, but his eyes lit up with purpose when he saw them. "Delegate Vega, Mr. Simpson," he called out. "I was just about to summon you. We're responding to the distress call. I need you both on the bridge." Without hesitation, they followed Thorne to the command center. The bridge was a flurry of activity, crew members working frantically at their stations. Commander Harper stood at the helm, barking orders as the Harmony prepared for warp jump. "Status report," Thorne demanded as he took his place at the captain's chair. "We'll reach the Unas colony in approximately 30 minutes, sir," Harper responded. "Long-range scans show multiple unidentified vessels in orbit. The colony's defenses are holding, but they're taking heavy damage." Vega felt her scales prickle with anxiety. She glanced at Patrick, who gave her a reassuring nod. "Captain," Vega said, stepping forward, "I request permission to establish communication with the colony. My presence might help calm the situation and coordinate our response." Thorne considered for a moment, then nodded. "Granted, use the secondary comm station." As Vega worked to establish a connection, Patrick joined the tactical team, offering insights on Una's physiology that might help in treating potential casualties. The next half hour was a blur of activity. As they dropped out of warp, the view screen filled with the chaotic scene of battle. The Unas colony, a sprawling complex of domed structures on a rocky moon, was surrounded by a swarm of sleek, predatory ships, unlike anything they'd seen before. The Harmony's arrival turned the tide of the battle. With their superior firepower and Vega's coordination with the colony's defenders, they managed to drive off the attackers. As the last enemy ship disappeared into the darkness of space, a collective sigh of relief swept through the bridge. In the aftermath of the battle, the Harmony's medical team, led by Dr. Reeves and assisted by Patrick, worked tirelessly to treat the injured Unas colonists. Vega found herself acting as a liaison, her unique position as both an Unas and a member of the Harmony's crew, proving invaluable. Days turned into weeks as they helped the colony recover and investigate the attack. The experience of working side by side in a crisis had strengthened the bond between the human crew and their Unas allies. Even those who had been skeptical before now spoke of the Unas with respect and camaraderie. One evening, as Patrick was reviewing data from the medical procedures they'd performed, Dr. Reeves approached him with an excited gleam in her eye. "Patrick, I've been analyzing the results from our treatments," she said, her voice low but intense. "The compatibility between human medical techniques and Una's physiology is remarkable. And there's more. The way Vega's venom interacted with your system during the captain's treatment, I think we've barely scratched the surface of its potential." Patrick leaned in, intrigued. "What are you suggesting?" I want to establish a dedicated laboratory on the ship, Reeves replied, to explore human Una's biological compatibility in depth, and I want you and Vega to be at the center of it. The idea was both exciting and daunting. Patrick glanced across the room to where Vega was speaking with a group of Una's engineers. She caught his eye and smiled, a gesture that sent an unexpected warmth through him. I'm in, he said, turning back to Reeves, but we'll need to speak with Vega and get approval from the captain. To Patrick's relief, both Vega and Captain Thorne enthusiastically supported the idea. Within days, a section of the medical bay had been converted into a state-of-the-art research laboratory. As they began their research, Patrick and Vega found themselves spending more time together than ever before. The work was fascinating, revealing new insights into both human and Una's biology, but it also required them to undergo a series of tests and experiments, often involving long hours in close proximity. One afternoon, as they were in the middle of a particularly intricate procedure, the ship suddenly lurched. Alarms blared as the artificial gravity flickered and failed. Patrick and Vega found themselves floating freely in the laboratory, surrounded by drifting equipment and data pads. In the confusion, their bodies pressed against each other, Vega's scales cool and smooth against Patrick's skin. Time seemed to slow as they looked at each other, their faces inches apart. Patrick felt his heart racing, acutely aware of every point of contact between them. Vega's eyes widened, her pupils dilating in a way Patrick had never seen before. The moment was broken by Captain Thorne's voice over the intercom, announcing a temporary malfunction in the gravity systems. As the artificial gravity slowly returned, Patrick and Vega disentangled themselves, both avoiding eye contact. We should secure the equipment, Patrick said, his voice husky. Vega nodded, her scales flushed with a deep blue hue. Yes, of course. As they worked to put the lab back in order, both were acutely aware of the tension between them. The physical attraction they'd experienced was impossible to ignore, but its implications were complex and far-reaching. Before they could address what had happened, a new alert sounded. Captain Thorne's voice came over the intercom once again, this time with news that would change the course of their mission. Attention all crew, Thorne announced. We've received new orders from command. The Harmony is to host a major diplomatic summit between human and Una's leadership. We'll be welcoming high-ranking officials from both civilizations aboard within the week. All departments are to begin preparations immediately. Patrick and Vega exchanged glances, the gravity of the announcement momentarily overshadowing their personal tensions. The summit would be a crucial next step in human-Una's relations, and their research would undoubtedly play a significant role. As they left the lab to attend the emergency crew meeting, both were keenly aware that their relationship, whatever it was becoming, was now intertwined with the fate of two species. The challenges ahead would test not only their professional abilities, but also the depths of their growing connection. Personal feelings and professional responsibilities. As they entered the conference room for the emergency meeting, they pushed their conflicting emotions aside, focusing on the task at hand. Captain Thorne stood at the head of the table, his face etched with concern. As you've heard, we're hosting a major diplomatic summit. This is a crucial opportunity for both our species, but it also presents significant security challenges. Admiral Chen, who had been conferencing in via hologram, flickered into view beside Thorne. We have reason to believe that there may be parties who wish to sabotage this summit. The attack on the Una's colony might have been just the beginning. Vega felt a chill run down her spine. She glanced at Patrick, who nodded almost imperceptibly. They had both suspected there was more to the colonial attack than met the eye. That's where you two come in, Thorne continued, gesturing to Patrick and Vega. Your unique partnership and the groundbreaking research you've been conducting make you ideally suited to assist with the investigation into these threats. Your ability to work across species lines could be invaluable, Admiral Chen added. We need you to use your combined expertise to uncover any potential saboteurs or hidden agendas. Patrick leaned forward, his brow furrowed in concentration. We'll need access to all ship systems and security logs. Granted, Thorne replied without hesitation. You'll have top-level clearance for the duration of this investigation. As the meeting concluded and the crew dispersed to their assigned tasks, Patrick and Vega found themselves alone in the corridor. We should start with the ship's maintenance records, Vega suggested, her scales shimmering with a mix of excitement and apprehension. Patrick nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Good thinking. We can cross-reference them with crew rotations and security camera footage. They made their way to a secluded data analysis room, their steps perfectly in sync. As they worked, poring over countless logs and records, their earlier tension gave way to a familiar rhythm of collaboration. Hours passed unnoticed as they followed lead after lead. It was Patrick who first noticed the discrepancy, a series of minor malfunctions in non-critical systems, each one seemingly insignificant on its own. "Vega, look at this," he called, gesturing to his screen. "These glitches, they're too random to be coincidental, but too subtle to trigger any alarms." Vega leaned in, her breath warm on Patrick's cheek as she studied the data. "You're right. It's as if someone's been testing the ship's systems, probing for weaknesses." Their eyes met, a spark of understanding passing between them. Without a word, they both knew their next move. "The cargo hold," they said in unison. Quickly they made their way through the ship's corridors, their steps urgent but measured to avoid drawing attention. As they entered the vast cargo bay, the enormity of their task hit them. Hundreds of containers and crates filled the space, each a potential hiding place for saboteurs or hidden technology. "We'll need to be systematic," Patrick said, pulling out a handheld scanner. "I'll start with the starboard side. You take port?" Vega nodded, her own scanner already humming to life. They worked in silence, methodically sweeping each section of the hold. An hour passed, then two, with nothing to show for their efforts. Just as fatigue began to set in, Vega's scanner picked up an anomaly. "Patrick," she called, her voice taut with excitement. "I'm getting strange readings from this section." Patrick hurried over, his own scanner confirming Vega's findings. Together, they began to examine the area more closely, their hands working in tandem to move crates and access panels. Suddenly, Patrick's fingers brushed against a hidden seam. With a soft click, a panel slid open, revealing a small, hidden compartment. Inside, nestled among a tangle of wires and circuitry, sat a device unlike anything they had ever seen. "What is it?" Vega whispered, her scales rippling with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Patrick carefully extracted the device, turning it over in his hands. "I'm not sure, but if I had to guess, some kind of advanced cloaking technology, and definitely not of human or Una's origin." As they examined the device more closely, the implications of their discovery began to sink in. This was no simple act of sabotage. It was evidence of a third party interfering in human-Una's relations. "We need to report this to Captain Thorne immediately," Vega said, her voice filled with urgency. Patrick nodded, carefully securing the device. As they turned to leave the cargo hold, the ship suddenly lurched violently. The lights flickered and died, plunging them into total darkness. In the pitch black of the cargo hold, Vega felt Patrick's hand find hers. The warmth of his touch was reassuring, but she could feel the tension in his grip. "The ship's lost power." Patrick's voice came through the darkness, tinged with worry. "We need to get to the bridge." Vega squeezed his hand in response, her mind racing. She knew what she had to do, even if the thought of it made her scales tingle with apprehension. Taking a deep breath, she focused inward, calling upon a rarely used ability of her species. Slowly, a soft blue-green glow began to emanate from her scales, casting an ethereal light around them. Patrick's eyes widened in awe, taking in the bioluminescent display. "Vega, that's incredible," he breathed, his face bathed in the gentle glow. She felt a flush of warmth at his admiration, but pushed the feeling aside. "It's not much, but it should be enough for us to navigate. We need to get to the auxiliary control room." With Vega's bioluminescence lighting their way, they carefully made their way out of the cargo hold and into the darkened corridors of the Harmony. The ship was eerily silent, save for the distant sounds of confused crew members and the occasional crash of unsecured items. As they moved through the ship, Vega was acutely aware of Patrick's proximity. The narrow beam of her bioluminescence meant he had to stay close to see, his breath warm on her neck as they navigated the treacherous darkness. They were halfway to the auxiliary control room when a chilling realization struck Patrick. The ship's AI, Arya. If the power's out, she might be compromised. Vega felt a surge of dread. If Arya was down, the ship was effectively blind and defenseless. They quickened their pace, the urgency of their mission growing with each step. Finally, they reached the auxiliary control room. The door, usually controlled by automatic sensors, stood resolutely shut. Patrick placed his hand on the manual release, looking to Vega for confirmation. She nodded, and together they pushed the heavy door open. The room was dark and silent, the usual hum of electronics conspicuously absent. Patrick made his way to the main console, his fingers flying over the keys as he attempted to bring the systems back online. "It's no use," he muttered, frustration evident in his voice. "Something's blocking the restart sequence. It's like Arya's been infected with some kind of virus." Vega moved closer, her bioluminescence illuminating the complex array of circuits and control panels. An idea began to form in her mind, born of the unique physiology of her species. "Patrick," she said, her voice steady despite the racing of her heart, "Unas have a natural electrical conductivity. If I can interface directly with the ship's systems, I might be able to jumpstart the power and give you a chance to purge the virus." Patrick's eyes widened as he grasped the implications of her suggestion. "Vega, that's incredibly dangerous. The electrical surge could seriously harm you." She met his gaze, her willpower unwavering. "We don't have a choice. The ship, the summit, everything we've worked for, it's all at risk." For a moment they stood in silence, the weight of the decision hanging between them. Then slowly, Patrick nodded. "Okay, but we do this together. I'll guide you through the process and monitor your vital signs." Vega took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. As she placed her hands on the main power coupling, she felt Patrick's presence behind her, a comforting warmth in the cool darkness of the control room. "Ready?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Vega nodded, her scales glowing brighter with grit. "Ready." As she began to channel her body's natural electricity into the ship's systems, Vega felt a surge of energy coursing through her. The sensation was overwhelming, a mix of pain and exhilaration that threatened to consume her. Through the haze of sensation, she heard Patrick's voice, steady and reassuring, guiding her through the process. His hands were on her shoulders, grounding her, keeping her focused on the task at hand. Slowly, agonizingly, the ship's systems began to flicker back to life. Lights blinked on, consoles hummed with renewed energy. As the auxiliary power stabilized, Patrick gently pulled Vega away from the coupling, supporting her as she swayed on her feet. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with awe and concern. "Are you all right?" Vega nodded weakly, leaning into his support. "I'm fine. Did it work? Is Arya back online?" Patrick turned to the main console, his fingers flying over the keys. "Partial systems are up, but Arya is still compromised. The virus is more sophisticated than anything I've seen before. I need to purge it manually, but it's going to take time we might not have." As if on cue, the ship shuddered, a deep vibration that they felt in their bones. Through the viewport, they could see unfamiliar stars streaking by. The Harmony was moving, but not under their control. "We're changing course," Vega realized, her voice tight with alarm. "The virus isn't just disabling our systems, it's taking control of the ship." Patrick's face was grim as he worked furiously at the console. "You're right. And if I'm reading this correctly, we're headed into uncharted space. Whoever planted that device in the cargo hold, they're not just trying to sabotage the summit, they're trying to kidnap it." The gravity of the situation settled over them like a heavy shroud. The fate of the Harmony, its crew, and the future of human-Unas relations now rested squarely on their shoulders. As Patrick continued to battle the virus, and Vega monitored their increasingly dire situation, they both knew that their next actions would determine not just their own fate, but potentially the fate of their entire civilizations. The hum of the partially restored systems filled the auxiliary control room, a constant reminder of the precarious state of the Harmony. Patrick's fingers flew over the console, his brow furrowed in concentration as he worked to purge the virus from Arya's systems. Vega stood beside him, her scales still faintly glowing from the electrical surge, monitoring the ship's trajectory on a secondary screen. "We're continuing to accelerate," she reported, her voice tense. At this rate, we'll be out of known space within the hour. Patrick nodded grimly, not taking his eyes off his work. The virus is adapting faster than I can counter it. It's like nothing I've ever seen before. We need a new approach. As they grappled with their seemingly impossible task, Dr. Reeves's voice suddenly came through on the emergency comm channel, startling them both. Patrick, Vega, are you there? I've been monitoring your vital signs remotely. What you two just did, it's unprecedented. The level of physiological synchronization between you is off the charts. Patrick and Vega exchanged a look of surprise. What do you mean, Doctor? Vega asked. Your brainwave patterns, heart rates, even your cellular responses. They're all in sync, Reeves explained, her voice filled with excitement despite the dire situation. It's as if your bodies are operating in perfect harmony. A spark of an idea flashed in Patrick's eyes. Doctor, could this synchronization be used somehow? To enhance our problem-solving capabilities, perhaps? There was a moment of silence as Reeves considered. Theoretically, yes, the Unas have a rarely used ability, a kind of mind link. If you two are as compatible as these readings suggest, you might be able to establish a connection strong enough to combine your knowledge and skills. Vega's scales rippled with a mix of anticipation and apprehension. The mind link is dangerous, Patrick. It's not something to be undertaken lightly. Patrick turned to her, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Do we have a choice? The virus is beating me at every turn. Together, we might have a chance. Vega searched his face, seeing the willpower there, but also trust, complete and unwavering trust in her, in them. Slowly, she nodded. All right, let's do it. They stood facing each other, hands clasped, foreheads nearly touching. Vega closed her eyes, focusing on the ancient techniques passed down through generations of her people. She felt Patrick's presence, a warm, steady light in her mind. Gradually, the barriers between them began to dissolve. Memories, thoughts, and emotions flowed freely between them. Patrick's analytical mind merged with Vega's intuitive understanding of complex systems. Their knowledge of human and Una's biology, computer systems, and ship operations all blended into a singular, powerful consciousness. With their minds linked, they turned as one to face the console. Their hands moved in perfect synchronization, attacking the virus from multiple angles simultaneously. What had seemed impossible moments ago now unfolded with startling clarity. As they worked, flashes of each other's lives played out in their shared consciousness. Patrick felt the weight of Vega's responsibilities as a diplomat, the loneliness of being the only Unas on a human ship. Vega experienced Patrick's passion for science, his deep-seated desire to bridge the gap between their species. And underlying it all, they both felt the growing attraction between them, now impossible to ignore or deny. The depth of their connection, the perfect compatibility of their minds and bodies, was overwhelming. In what seemed like both an eternity and no time at all, they had done it. The virus was purged, Aria was back online, and control of the ship was restored. As they slowly disconnected from the mind link, they found themselves breathless, staring at each other with new understanding. "We did it," Patrick whispered, his voice filled with awe. Vega nodded, her scales flushed with a deep, iridescent blue. "We did. But Patrick, what we just experienced—" "I know," he said softly, reaching out to touch her face. "Everything's changed, hasn't it?" Before Vega could respond, Captain Thorne's voice came over the intercom, now fully functional. "Auxiliary control, report. What's our status?" Patrick reluctantly dropped his hand, turning to the console. "Systems restored, Captain. We've regained control of the ship, but sir, we've made some disturbing discoveries. We need to speak with you and Admiral Chen immediately." "Understood," Thorne replied. "Report to the bridge at once." As they prepared to leave the auxiliary control room, Patrick and Vega paused, looking at each other. The intensity of their shared experience hung between them, full of promise and uncertainty. "We should go," Vega said softly, though she made no move to leave. Patrick nodded, taking a step closer to her. "We should. But Vega, what we just went through, we can't ignore it." "I know," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. And I don't want to. For a moment, they stood on the precipice of something new and exhilarating. Then, with a shared nod of understanding, they turned and headed for the bridge. The immediate crisis was over, but they both knew that their journey, both personal and professional, was nowhere near the end. As they walked, their hands brushed against each other, a small spark of electricity jumping between them. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, their bond now deeper and more profound than either of them could have ever imagined. As they approached the bridge, the enormity of what lay ahead began to sink in. The door slid open, revealing a flurry of activity. Captain Thorne and Admiral Chen stood at the center, their faces etched with concern as they pored over tactical displays. "Report," Thorne barked as Patrick and Vega entered. Patrick stepped forward, his voice steady despite the residual effects of the mind link. "We've neutralized the immediate threat, Captain. The virus has been purged, and we've regained control of the ship's systems." Vega continued seamlessly. "However, our findings suggest a far greater danger than we initially suspected. The device planted in the cargo hold wasn't just meant to sabotage the summit, it was part of a coordinated attempt to kidnap the entire delegation." Admiral Chen's eyes narrowed. "Kidnap? By whom?" Patrick and Vega exchanged a glance, their newly forged connection allowing them to communicate volumes without words. Patrick took a deep breath before answering. "We believe we're dealing with a previously unknown species, sir. One with technology far beyond our own." The bridge fell silent as the implication sank in. Captain Thorne was the first to speak. "We need to get back to the summit location immediately. This information changes everything." As the Harmony changed course, Patrick and Vega found themselves thrust into the center of a whirlwind of activity. Their unique experience and the depth of their insights made them invaluable to the mission. Over the next few days, they worked tirelessly, briefing senior officials and helping to formulate a response to this new threat. Their efforts did not go unnoticed. By the time the Harmony reached the summit location, Patrick and Vega had been officially recognized as ambassadors for human-UNA's relations. As they disembarked, they were immediately ushered into a series of high-stakes meetings with leaders from both species. The grand hall where the meetings took place was a marvel of engineering, designed to accommodate both human and UNA's physiology. As Patrick and Vega took their seats at the central table, they could feel the weight of expectation pressing down on them. "Ambassadors," the human chairperson began, "you claim to have evidence of a threat to our alliance. Please, proceed with your report." Patrick activated a holographic display, filling the air with complex schematics and data streams. "What you're seeing is an analysis of the device found aboard the Harmony. Its sophistication surpasses anything in our combined technological arsenal." Vega stepped in, her scales shifting in patterns that conveyed both urgency and composure to the UNA's delegates. "Our investigation has led us to believe that this device was planted by a species we're calling the Zyraxians. They possess technology capable of not only disabling our most advanced systems, but also taking control of them remotely." Murmurs of concern rippled through the assembly. UNA's elder leaned forward, his voice a low rumble. "What evidence do you have of their intentions?" Patrick and Vega moved in perfect synchronization, their physiological harmony on full display as they presented their findings. They took turns explaining the Zyraxian threat, finishing each other's sentences and anticipating questions before they were asked. As they spoke, Dr. Reeves, who had been observing from the sidelines, leaned over to Captain Thorne. "It's remarkable," she whispered. "Their neural patterns are almost perfectly aligned. I've never seen anything like it." Thorne nodded, his eyes fixed on the ambassadors. "Whatever happened in that control room, it's changed them. Let's hope it's for the better. We're going to need every advantage we can get." The meeting stretched on for hours as plans were formulated and strategies debated. Through it all, Patrick and Vega remained at the forefront, their unique bond allowing them to bridge the gap between human and UNA's perspectives with unprecedented effectiveness. As the session finally adjourned, Patrick and Vega found themselves surrounded by a mix of admiring and curious delegates. An UNA scientist approached them, his scales shimmering with interest. "Ambassadors, your ability to work in tandem is fascinating. Would you be open to some non-invasive studies? The implications for our understanding of interspecies compatibility could be groundbreaking. Before they could respond, a human diplomat cut in, his voice permeated with barely concealed disapproval. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. We're here to discuss a threat to our civilizations, not to conduct social experiments. Patrick felt Vega tense beside him, her scales flickering with a mix of anger and hurt. He placed a hand on her arm, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed by those around them. We'll certainly consider any request that might benefit the Alliance, he said diplomatically. For now, though, I believe we all have preparations to make. As they made their way out of the hall, Patrick and Vega could feel the eyes of the assembly on them. Their connection, once a private marvel, had become a public spectacle. The implications of their bond were starting to ripple outward, touching on deep-seated beliefs and long-held prejudices in both societies. Patrick, Vega said softly as they walked, I fear we may have opened a door we cannot close. He nodded, understanding her concern. Maybe so, but if it helps us face what's coming, isn't it worth it? Before Vega could respond, they were approached by Admiral Chen. Ambassadors, your presence is requested in the war room. We're assembling a special task force to deal with the Zyraxian threat, and we want you to lead it. Patrick and Vega exchanged a look, a whole conversation passing between them in an instant. They turned back to the Admiral, their decision made. We're ready, sir, Patrick said. Lead the way, Vega added. As they followed Admiral Chen, Patrick and Vega knew they were stepping into uncharted territory. The fate of two species rested on their shoulders, and the true test of their newfound abilities was yet to come. The Zyraxians were out there, waiting, and the battle for the future of human-UNA's relations was about to begin in earnest. The challenges ahead seemed insurmountable, but with their newfound connection, Patrick and Vega felt ready to face whatever the universe threw at them. As the dust settled from the summit, Admiral Chen approached the pair with a determined look in his eyes. Ambassadors, we have a critical mission for you. Our intelligence suggests there's a hidden Zyraxian outpost in a nearby sector. We need you to infiltrate and gather information. Patrick and Vega exchanged a knowing glance. This was the moment they had been preparing for. When do we leave? Patrick asked, his voice steady. Immediately, Chen replied. We've prepared a stealth ship for you. It's equipped with the latest cloaking technology, but we're counting on your unique abilities to ensure its success. Hours later, Patrick and Vega found themselves aboard the sleek stealth ship, gliding silently through the void of space. As they approached Zyraxian territory, Vega's scales began to shimmer with an otherworldly glow. Ready? Patrick asked, his hand hovering over the controls. Vega nodded, her body tensing as she focused her energy. Initiating electromagnetic field manipulation. Now! The ship's cloaking technology merged seamlessly with Vega's natural abilities, rendering them virtually undetectable. They slipped past Zyraxian patrols with ease, their hearts racing as they neared their target, a small, uninhabited moon orbiting a massive gas giant. Landing on the moon's surface, they moved swiftly towards the hidden facility. Patrick marveled at their perfect synchronization, their movements fluid and purposeful. As they approached the outpost's security systems, they reached out with their minds, their newly developed telekinetic abilities probing for weaknesses. With a combination of skill and their enhanced abilities, they bypassed the security measures and entered the facility. The interior was a marvel of alien technology, sleek and efficient in a way that made even the most advanced human and UNA systems seem primitive by comparison. They found the central database quickly, their shared consciousness guiding them through the labyrinthine structure. As Patrick began the download, Vega kept watch, her senses hyper-alert for any sign of danger. Patrick, she whispered urgently, look at this. He turned to the screen she was indicating, his eyes widening as he took in the information. This can't be right, he muttered, but deep down, he knew it was. The Zyraxians weren't just trying to prevent an alliance. They were planning a full-scale invasion of both human and UNA's space. The scope of their plans was staggering, revealing a level of technological advancement that dwarfed anything their own species possessed. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the facility. Patrick cursed under his breath. They've detected us! We need to move! Now! They sprinted through the corridors, the sound of approaching Zyraxian guards echoing behind them. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with a squad of soldiers, their adaptive camouflage suits shimmering as they raised their energy weapons. Patrick and Vega moved as one, their enhanced abilities allowing them to anticipate and counter each attack. Vega's tail lashed out, knocking weapons from alien hands, while Patrick used their shared telekinetic power to create a protective barrier around them. In the chaos of the fight, a Zyraxian energy blast slipped through their defenses, catching Patrick's left arm. He cried out in pain as the energy seared through his flesh, the smell of burning skin filling the air. Vega's reaction was instantaneous. She pulled Patrick into a nearby alcove, her scales shifting rapidly as she accessed her venom glands. With practiced precision, she applied a healing salve to his wounds, the effect almost immediate as the burned tissue began to regenerate. "We're not out of this yet," Patrick grunted, pushing through the pain. "We need to get back to the ship." As they fought their way through the facility, they encountered a young Zyraxian who stood out from the others. Unlike the hostile guards, this one's eyes were filled with curiosity rather than aggression. "You're different," the Zyraxian said, its voice a mix of clicks and whistles that their translation devices struggled to interpret. In a split-second decision, Patrick and Vega exchanged a look of agreement. "You're coming with us," Patrick declared, grabbing the young Zyraxian's arm. They burst out of the facility, their unexpected prisoner in tow, and raced towards their ship. Behind them, the sound of a Zyraxian patrol ship filled the air. Vega pushed her electromagnetic manipulation to its limits, cloaking their escape as they lifted off from the moon's surface. As they broke free from the moon's gravity, Patrick's condition suddenly worsened. The energy from the Zyraxian weapon was spreading through his body, causing him to convulse in pain. "Vega," he gasped, "I don't think I'm going to make it." Vega's eyes narrowed with willpower. "Yes, you will," she said firmly. She began to produce a more potent version of her healing venom, knowing the risk it posed to them both. "This is going to hurt," she warned, preparing to inject the concentrated venom directly into Patrick's bloodstream. As the venom entered his system, Patrick's body arched in agony. Vega held him tightly, their shared pain pulsing through their bond. The young Zyraxian watched in fascination as Patrick's wounds began to heal at an accelerated rate. But the process didn't stop there. As the venom worked its way through Patrick's body, it began to alter his very DNA. His senses sharpened, his reflexes quickened, and a newfound strength coursed through his veins. As they approached the rendezvous point with the human Una's fleet, Patrick and Vega knew that everything had changed. Their bond had deepened beyond anything they could have imagined, and the intelligence they carried would reshape the conflict with the Zyraxians. The harmony loomed before them, a beacon of hope in the vastness of space. As they prepared to dock, Patrick and Vega exchanged a look of understanding. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, as something more than human, more than Unas, and perhaps the key to both their species' survival. Survival. As the harmony grew larger in their view screen, Patrick and Vega exchanged a look of relief tinged with apprehension. Their mission had been successful, but at what cost? The docking procedure was a blur of activity. As soon as the airlock sealed, medical teams swarmed the ship, led by Dr. Reeves. Her eyes widened as she took in Patrick's altered appearance. "My God," she breathed, scanning him with a handheld device. "The physiological changes are remarkable." Patrick flexed his hand, still getting used to the newfound strength coursing through his body. "It feels different, but not wrong." Vega stood protectively close to him, her scales shimmering with concern. "I had to do it," she said, her voice low. "It was the only way to save him." Dr. Reeves nodded, her scientific curiosity warring with her concern. "We'll need to run a full battery of tests, but first, Admiral Chen wants to see you both." And her gaze shifted to the young Zyraxian, who was watching the proceedings with wide alien eyes. "This is Excel," Patrick explained. "He helped us escape." Security personnel immediately moved to flank the Zyraxian, who made no move to resist. As they were escorted from the docking bay, Patrick could feel the stares of the crew members they passed. Some looked at him with awe, others with fear. Admiral Chen was waiting for them in the war room, her face grim. "Report," she said without preamble. Patrick and Vega took turns explaining their findings, their words overlapping in perfect synchronization. As they described the scale of the Xeraxian invasion plans, the color drained from Chen's face. "This changes everything," she muttered, poring over the data they had retrieved. "We need to accelerate our defense plans immediately." As if on cue, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Chen's comm device crackled to life. "Admiral, we've intercepted Xeraxian communications. Their invasion fleet is mobilizing earlier than expected. We have weeks, at most." Chen's heart made. "Understood. Initiate Protocol Omega." She turned to Patrick and Vega. "We're going to need your unique abilities more than ever. I'm assigning you to lead a special operations team. Your mission will be to infiltrate Xeraxian space and disable their primary defense grid." Patrick felt a surge of adrenaline. "When do we start?" "Immediately," Chen replied. "But first, we need to address this." She gestured to Patrick's altered form. Dr. Reeves stepped forward. "Admiral, I've made a preliminary analysis. The changes to Patrick's physiology are significant, but they appear to be reversible. With time, I believe we could develop a method to temporarily enhance other human operatives in a similar manner." Chen nodded. "Good. That could give us the edge we need, but we'll need to manage the public perception carefully. There are already rumblings of discontent." As if to underscore her point, the door to the war room burst open. Senator Victor Kane stormed in, his face red with anger. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, pointing an accusatory finger at Patrick. "You're allowing this abomination to roam free?" Vega's scales flashed dangerously, but Patrick placed a calming hand on her arm. Chen stepped between them and the senator. "Senator Kane, this is a restricted area. You're not authorized to be here." Kane's eyes narrowed. "The public has a right to know what's happening. This hybridization is a threat to human purity. He should be quarantined and studied, not given free rein of the ship." Before Chen could respond, an Unas elder entered the room, his scales dull with age and wisdom. "And what of Vega?" he rumbled. "She has shared our most sacred biological secrets with the humans. This is an outrage." The room erupted into chaos, with voices shouting over one another. Patrick and Vega stood at the center of the storm, their hands clasped tightly together. Chen's voice cut through the din like a knife. "Enough!" The room fell silent. "We are facing an existential threat. Our very survival depends on our ability to work together. Patrick and Vega have already proven the power of human Unas cooperation. We need more of that, not less." She turned to Dr. Reeves. "Prepare a series of public demonstrations showcasing their abilities. Let everyone see what we can achieve together." To Patrick and Vega, she said, "You two, get your team ready. You leave in 48 hours." As they left the war room, Patrick and Vega could feel the weight of responsibility settling on their shoulders. They made their way to the training area, where a mixed group of human and Unas operatives awaited them. "All right, team," Patrick said, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his mind. "We've got a lot of work to do, and not much time to do it. Let's get started." As they began their intensive training regimen, Patrick and Vega knew that the real challenges still lay ahead. The fate of two civilizations rested on their success, and failure was not an option. Patrick and Vega led their team through rigorous drills, pushing the limits of their combined human and Unas capabilities. As the 48-hour deadline approached, they finalized their gear and boarded the stealth ship designated for their mission. The sleek vessel slipped silently through space, its advanced cloaking technology rendering it invisible to Xeraxian sensors. Vega's natural electromagnetic manipulation abilities further enhanced their stealth, creating an impenetrable shroud around the ship. As they crossed into Xeraxian territory, Patrick felt a surge of adrenaline. His enhanced senses, a result of Vega's healing venom, allowed him to perceive minute details of their surroundings. He noticed subtle shifts in the ship's energy output, adjusting their course to maintain optimal stealth. Their initial progress was smooth, bypassing the outer defense perimeters without incident. However, as they neared the heart of Xeraxian space, an unexpected obstacle loomed before them. "Energy field detected," reported their UNA's navigator, his scales shifting nervously. "Composition unknown. It's massive." Patrick's eyes narrowed as he studied the readouts. The energy field pulsed with an otherworldly glow, stretching as far as their sensors could detect. "This wasn't in our intel," he muttered. Vega moved beside him, her tail twitching with concentration. "I can feel it," she said, her voice low. "The electromagnetic patterns are complex." Patrick closed his eyes, reaching out with his newly heightened senses. Suddenly, he grasped something. "There's a pattern," he said, eyes snapping open. "Vega, can you see it?" Their mind link hummed with shared understanding. Without a word, they began to work in tandem, their telekinetic abilities intertwining. The rest of the team watched in awe as an invisible bubble formed around their ship. "Brace for impact," Patrick warned as they approached the energy field. The ship shuddered as it made contact, but the bubble held. They passed through unscathed, leaving the shimmering barrier behind them. A collective sigh of relief filled the cabin. "Impressive," their human weapons specialist whispered, eyeing Patrick and Vega with newfound respect. As they approached the Xeraxian homeworld, the true scale of their challenge became apparent. The planet bristled with defense stations, and the primary grid control was buried deep underground. "We'll need to go in quiet," Patrick said, studying the facility schematics. "Vega and I will take point. The rest of you, stay close and be ready for anything." They infiltrated the complex with surgical precision. Patrick and Vega's shared consciousness, allowing them to coordinate their movements flawlessly. However, each layer of security proved more challenging than the last. As they rounded a corner, they stumbled upon a group of Xeraxian scientists. Tension filled the air as both groups froze, sizing each other up. One Xeraxian stepped forward, her large eyes filled with a mixture of fear and curiosity. You're not supposed to be here," she said, her translator struggling with the complex clicks and whistles of her native tongue. Patrick raised his hand slowly. "We're not here to hurt you," he said, his voice calm despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "I'm Patrick, and this is Vega. We need your help." The Xeraxian's eyes widened as she took in Patrick's altered appearance and Vega's UNA's form. "I'm Dr. Zara," she replied, her gaze darting between them. What are you?" Vega stepped forward, her scales shimmering. "We represent a cooperation between our species, one that could benefit all of us." Dr. Zara's curiosity seemed to override her fear. "Fascinating," she murmured. "The physiological implications alone?" Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the facility. Dr. Zara jumped, looking torn. I can help you access the core," she said quickly. "But we must hurry." As they raced through the corridors, Xeraxian security forces converged on their position. Energy weapons fire filled the air, forcing them to take cover. Patrick's enhanced reflexes kicked in as he dove behind a console, narrowly avoiding a blast. Vega moved with fluid grace, her tail lashing out to disarm a Xeraxian soldier. "Cover me!" Patrick shouted, sprinting toward a bank of controls. A Xeraxian energy blast caught him in the shoulder, searing through his suit. He gritted his teeth, expecting searing pain, but instead felt a strange tingling sensation. Before his eyes, the wound began to close. Vega noticed his surprise. "Your healing abilities are evolving," she said, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and concern. With Dr. Zara's guidance, they fought their way to the central control room. Patrick and Vega linked minds, interfacing with the alien technology. The complexity of the data streams was overwhelming, but together they navigated the system, initiating the shutdown sequence for the defense grid. As the grid powered down, they received an urgent communication from Admiral Chen. Her holographic image flickered into view, her face grave. "We have a situation," she said, her voice tight. "Senator Kane has staged a coup. He's taken control of a significant portion of the human fleet. Our alliance is in jeopardy." Patrick and Vega exchanged a look of understanding. Their mission's success would mean nothing if the alliance fractured now. "We're staying," Patrick said firmly. "We'll gather intelligence, maybe even find allies here. The rest of the team can return to support you, Admiral." As their extraction ship departed, Patrick, Vega, and a small group including Dr. Zara made their way to an abandoned Xeraxian research facility on the outskirts of the capital city. As they set up their hidden base of operations, the weight of their new mission settled upon them. Isolated deep within enemy territory, Patrick and Vega knew that the challenges ahead would test them like never before. But as they looked at each other, their bond stronger than ever, they felt ready to face whatever came next. As they settled into their hidden base within the abandoned Xeraxian research facility, Patrick and Vega wasted no time in establishing a covert intelligence network. The cavernous halls, once bustling with alien scientists, now echoed with the quiet hum of repurposed equipment. Dr. Zara proved invaluable, her knowledge of Xeraxian culture and technology filling crucial gaps in their understanding. She pored over data streams, decoding encrypted communications and providing context for the flood of information they gathered. The Xeraxian political structure is more complex than we initially thought, Dr. Zara explained, her large eyes blinking rapidly as she processed the data. There's significant opposition to the invasion plans, but it's been suppressed by the current regime. Patrick nodded, his enhanced senses picking up subtle fluctuations in the facility's power grid. We need to find these dissenters. They could be our best chance at undermining the war effort from within. As they delved deeper into Xeraxian society, a name kept surfacing in their intelligence reports: Krell. This charismatic figure seemed to be at the center of a growing resistance movement. Vega's scales shimmered as she reviewed the information. We need to make contact with Krell. His network could provide us with the reach we need to effect real change. Their opportunity came sooner than expected. During a covert operation to gather intelligence on Xeraxian military deployments, Patrick and Vega encountered a group of resistance fighters led by Krell himself. The Xeraxian rebel leader was tall and lithe, with iridescent skin that seemed to ripple with terrifying energy. His multifaceted eyes studied Patrick and Vega with intense curiosity. "So, the rumors are true," Krell said, his translator struggling to convey the complex harmonics of his native speech. "A human Unas hybrid and a genetically enhanced Unas. Your presence here changes everything." Patrick stepped forward, his stance relaxed but ready. "We have a common enemy. Your government's invasion plans threaten not just our worlds, but the stability of this entire sector." Krell's eyes narrowed. "And what do you propose?" "An alliance," Vega interjected, her tail swishing gently. "Combined, our knowledge and resources could tip the scales." As they solidified their partnership with Krell's resistance, Patrick and Vega continued to experience physiological changes. Patrick's senses sharpened to an almost painful degree, allowing him to detect the faintest energy signatures of Xeraxian security systems. Vega's natural camouflage abilities evolved, her scales now able to perfectly mimic the metallic sheen of Xeraxian architecture. Their enhanced capabilities proved crucial during a high-stakes infiltration of a Xeraxian military research facility. As they slipped past layers of security, Patrick suddenly froze, his heightened senses picking up something alarming. "Vega," he whispered, his voice tight. "Do you feel that? There's an energy signature unlike anything we've encountered before." Vega's scales rippled with concern. "I sense it too. It's wrong somehow." They traced the source to a heavily guarded laboratory. Inside, they discovered plans for a weapon of unimaginable destructive power, one capable of destabilizing planetary cores. "This goes beyond invasion," Dr. Zara gasped, her translator struggling to keep up with her rapid speech. "With this, they could render entire worlds uninhabitable." The stakes of their mission suddenly skyrocketed. As they worked to sabotage the weapon's development, Patrick and Vega found their bond deepening even further. The constant danger and reliance on each other in hostile territory forged in connection that transcended their already extraordinary link. During one particularly close call with Xeraxian security forces, Patrick was exposed to a concentrated burst of energy weapons fire. Instead of causing harm, the exposure triggered an unexpected reaction in his hybrid physiology. Time seemed to slow as strength and speed beyond anything he'd experienced before surged through him. In a blur of motion, Patrick disarmed the entire security team before they could even raise their weapons. As the rush faded, he turned to see Vega staring at him, her expression a mix of awe and concern. "Patrick," she said softly, "what's happening to us?" Before he could respond, their communication device crackled to life with an urgent transmission from Admiral Chen. Her holographic image flickered into view, her face etched with worry. "Patrick Vega, we have a critical situation." Chen's voice was strained. "Senator Kane's coup has gained momentum. He's turned a significant portion of the fleet against us. Our alliance is fracturing at the worst possible moment." The news hit them like a physical blow. All their efforts to undermine the Xeraxian threat could be for nothing if their own civilizations tore themselves apart. "We need to accelerate our plans," Patrick said, his mind racing. "The weapon we discovered, if the Xeraxians deploy it, none of our internal conflicts will matter." Vega nodded, her scales shifting to match the metallic walls around them. "We need to strike at the heart of their war machine, the shipyards." As they began formulating their most daring plan yet, a planet-wide alert suddenly blared through the Xeraxian communication channels. The Supreme Commander, a ruthless strategist named Vox, had become aware of their activities and launched a massive hunt for the infiltrators. Patrick and Vega exchanged a determined look. Time was running out, and the fate of 3 civilizations now hung in the balance. They had to act, and act soon, before it was too late for them all. Patrick and Vega exchanged a grave look, the weight of their impossible choice bearing down on them. The fate of 3 civilizations hung in the balance, and time was running out. "We need to split up," Patrick said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'll stay here and finish uploading the virus to cripple their war machine. You take a Xeraxian scout ship and race back to human Una's space. We can't let Kane's coup tear apart everything we've worked for." Vega's scales rippled with concern, but she nodded. "Be careful, Patrick. I'll do everything I can to prevent the conflict between our people." With a final, lingering glance, they parted ways. Patrick slipped through the shadows of the Xeraxian shipyard, his enhanced senses on high alert as he made his way to the central control hub. Vega, meanwhile, used her evolved camouflage abilities to infiltrate a nearby hangar and commandeer a sleek Xeraxian scout ship. As Patrick worked feverishly to upload the virus, his fingers flying across the alien interface, alarms blared throughout the facility. He sensed a presence behind him and spun around to find himself face-to-face with Supreme Commander Vox. The Xeraxian leader's eyes glowed with malevolence. "So you're the intruder who's been causing us so much trouble?" Vox hissed, raising an energy weapon. Patrick's hybrid physiology kicked into overdrive. Time seemed to slow as he dodged the incoming blast, his body moving with inhuman speed and agility. He launched himself at Vox, using his newfound strength to grapple with the Xeraxian commander. As they fought, Patrick's mind raced, desperately trying to buy time for the upload to complete. He could hear the heavy footsteps of Xeraxian security forces converging on their location. Meanwhile, Vega pushed the stolen scout ship to its absolute limits, the stars blurring into streaks of light as she hurtled through space. Her heart raced as she approached the Una's homeworld, seeing the flashes of weapons fire that indicated the battle had already begun. Without hesitation, she opened a channel to Admiral Chen's flagship. "Admiral, this is Vega. I have critical information about the Xeraxian threat. We need to stop this conflict immediately." Chen's voice crackled over the comm, tight with stress. "Vega, what in the world are you doing here? We're in the middle of repelling Kane's forces." "I know, Admiral, but trust me, we have bigger problems. Let me help you end this quickly." Using her intimate knowledge of Una's physiology and defense systems, Vega coordinated with Chen's forces, guiding them to weak points in Kane's formation. Her expertise, combined with the advanced Xeraxian technology of her stolen ship, proved to be the edge they needed. In a daring maneuver, Vega targeted Kane's flagship with a precision strike, using the scout ship's alien weapons to disable its main systems without destroying the vessel. "Now, Admiral," she called out, "board that ship and arrest Kane before he can do any more damage." Back on the Xeraxian homeworld, Patrick found himself cornered by Vox and his security team. The upload was seconds away from completion, but he was out of options. Just as Vox raised his weapon for a killing blow, the wall behind him exploded inward. Through the debris stepped Krell, flanked by a squad of resistance fighters. Sorry we're late, the Zyraxian rebel said, his multifaceted eyes gleaming. We had to take a few detours. With the Resistance's help, Patrick and Krell's forces quickly overpowered Vox and his loyalists. As the last of the security team fell, Patrick's console beeped, signaling the successful upload of the virus. It's done, Patrick breathed, relief washing over him. The shipyards are ours. Krell placed a hand on Patrick's shoulder. You've given us a fighting chance. Now let's see what we can do with it. As the Resistance secured control of the shipyard, Patrick's thoughts turned to Vega and the conflict raging in human Una's space. He could only hope that she had arrived in time to make a difference. Aboard Chen's flagship, Vega stood before the assembled human and Una's leaders, her voice filled with urgency as she revealed the full extent of the Zyraxian threat. The evidence of their planet-killing capabilities sent shockwaves through the gathered officials. We stand on the brink of annihilation, Vega said, her scales shimmering with intensity. Our only hope lies in unity. Humans, Unas, we must stand together or fall divided. Her impassioned plea, coupled with the irrefutable evidence she presented, finally bridged the divide between the two species. As the leaders debated and negotiated, Vega felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, they had averted disaster in time. As the combined human-Unas fleet began preparations for the anticipated Zyraxian invasion, a transmission cut through the tense atmosphere. Patrick's face appeared on the main view screen, his expression a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. Vega, Admiral Chen, everyone, I have news from the Zyraxian homeworld. You're not going to believe this.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.